You're already thinking. Right now, this second. A current running beneath everything. Beneath this moment, beneath your breath, beneath the version of yourself you show the world. You didn't choose to start. It just began the way it always does, quietly and without permission. And that's the problem. Most people never question the thoughts moving through them. They assume the mind is a mirror, passively reflecting what's real, what's possible, what they deserve. But the mind isn't a mirror. It's a machine. And like any machine, it builds exactly what it's been programmed to build. Not what you hope for, what you believe. Here's what no one tells you early enough. The world doesn't respond to your effort first. It responds to your identity. It bends toward the version of you that shows up in your thinking before a single action is taken. The version that exists in the quiet, in the unseen, in the unguarded moment before you speak. This isn't motivation. This isn't a pep talk dressed in philosophy. This is architecture. 6 principles, each one a revelation about the invisible structure behind the life you're living and the life you keep almost reaching. You don't need more drive. You need to think differently. Before we go any further, if you've already decided this is the year your thinking changes, type "I decide" below. Say it like you mean it. Because you do. And once you do, the world will follow. Principle 1. Your thoughts are commands, not comments. Imagine standing in a field at night, holding a flashlight. Wherever you point it, that's what becomes real to you, the tree, the path, the shadow. Everything outside the beam still exists, but for all practical purposes, it doesn't. Not to you, not in this moment. Your attention works the same way. Every thought you hold with consistency isn't a passive observation. It's a directive, a command to your nervous system, your perception, your behavior. The ancient Stoics understood this before modern neuroscience had the language for it. Marcus Aurelius didn't write "think better" thoughts as a self-help platitude. He wrote it because he understood that the emperor of Rome was still, first and most fundamentally, the ruler of his own inner world, and that empire began there. The science confirms what philosophy intuited. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means that every repeated thought literally changes the physical structure of your mind. The grooves deepen, the pathways strengthen. Think something often enough and it stops being a thought. It becomes a reflex, a default, a worldview you no longer examine because it now feels like truth. This is why 2 people can stand in identical circumstances and see completely different realities. One sees obstacles, one sees openings, not because their situations differ, but because their thinking commands different perceptions, different responses, different outcomes. Henry Ford was precise about this. Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you are right, not metaphorically, mechanically. So the first question to ask yourself, honestly, without defense, is this: what are you commanding? Not what are you wishing, not what are you hoping. What are you consistently, repeatedly, quietly telling yourself about who you are and what's possible for you? Because whatever that is, your world is organizing itself around it right now. The flashlight is always on, the beam is always pointing somewhere. The only question is whether you're the one deciding where it goes, or whether old habits, old fears, and old voices are doing it for you. Take the flashlight back. That's where it starts. Principle 2. The subconscious doesn't sleep. There's a part of your mind you've never had a conversation with. You can't sit down with it, reason with it, or negotiate. It doesn't respond to logic. It doesn't care about your intentions or your 5-year plan. It operates in the background, always, processing roughly 11 million bits of information per second, while your conscious mind handles about 50. Let that land. 50 bits, 11 million. You are not the CEO of your mind. You are, at best, the spokesperson. Napoleon Hill called it the subconscious mind, a vast, impersonal force that accepts whatever is planted in it and works tirelessly day and night to bring that reality into form. Carl Jung spent a lifetime mapping its architecture, showing how the unseen interior shapes the visible exterior in ways we rarely recognize until the damage or the grace has already arrived. Here's what this means for you practically. The beliefs you formed at 12 years old about whether you're capable, whether you're worthy, whether the world is safe or threatening, those beliefs are still running, right now, shaping the risks you take and the ones you quietly avoid, coloring the way you interpret a stranger's glance, a missed opportunity, a door that didn't open. The subconscious doesn't sleep. It doesn't take weekends. It doesn't distinguish between a memory and an instruction. Which means, if you want to change what you're building, you don't change your schedule. You change what you're feeding the machine below. This is where visualization becomes something more than a motivational exercise. When Edison imagined an invention before it existed, when Ford held the vision of the Model T when everyone around him called it impossible, they weren't daydreaming. They were programming, feeding the subconscious a directive it would then work to fulfill, invisibly, relentlessly, in the background of every waking hour. You already do this. The question is whether you're doing it deliberately or by accident. Most people are feeding their subconscious fear, repetition, and old stories. The mind obeys, the world reflects it back. Change the input, change the output. It really is that clean. Principle 3. Repetition is the architect. Nothing great was ever built once. Not a bridge, not a body, not a belief system worth standing on. Everything of substance in this world was laid down in layers, repeated action, repeated thought, repeated commitment over time, until what was fragile became structural. The ancient Stoics practiced what they called ascesis, deliberate, daily discipline of the mind, not occasional reflection, daily, routine, ritualistic. Marcus Aurelius didn't just philosophize about virtue. He rehearsed it every morning before Rome required anything of him. He wrote to himself, in private, without audience, because he understood that the mind needs consistent instruction, not occasional inspiration. Repetition is how the temporary becomes permanent. Modern psychology calls it habit formation. Neuroscience calls it myelination, the process by which repeated neural pathways become insulated, faster, more automatic. But you can call it something simpler. Practice makes permanent, not perfect, permanent. Whatever you practice, including thought patterns, eventually stops requiring effort. It simply becomes who you are. This is the mechanism behind affirmation, visualization, and mental ritual, not as magical thinking, but as deliberate repetition that rewires the default settings of your inner world. Here's a practical truth most people skip past. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your mental habits. The person who achieves something extraordinary didn't just want it more than you. They rehearsed it more. They returned to the vision, the belief, the identity, again, 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 until it stopped feeling like aspiration and started feeling like memory of something that hadn't happened yet. That's the edge. Not talent, not luck. Repetition applied to the right things, to the thoughts, to the beliefs, to the identity, until the extraordinary becomes the path of least resistance. So ask yourself what you're rehearsing. What thoughts do you return to most consistently? What story runs on loop when no one's watching? Because the architect is always working. And it is building, stone by stone, exactly what you keep handing it. Principle 4. The moment of decision. Fear doesn't live in the future. It lives in the gap. That suspended, uncertain space between where you are and where you've decided to go or haven't decided. And here is the part most people never realize. The fear doesn't come from the decision itself. It comes from the absence of one. Indecision is not safety. It is the most exhausting place a human being can live. The Stoics called it akrasia, acting against your own best judgment, or more often, failing to act at all. Epictetus was blunt about it. The chief task in life is to identify and separate matters so that you can say clearly which things are within my power and which are not. The moment you do that, the moment you decide, something shifts. The nervous energy of possibility collapses into the clean, focused energy of direction. Napoleon Hill studied hundreds of the most successful people of his era and found one trait that appeared without exception in all of them, the habit of reaching decisions promptly, not recklessly, but promptly. They did not sit in the gap. They chose, and the choosing itself reorganized everything around them. Think about a decision you've been avoiding, not the small ones, the real one, the one you wake up with. You already know what it is, and you already know, somewhere below the fear, what you need to do. The delay isn't protecting you, it's costing you, in energy, in clarity, in the slow erosion of trust you have in yourself. Here's what decision actually does. It eliminates an entire universe of alternatives. And that sounds like loss until you realize that those alternatives were the source of the paralysis. When you decide, you don't lose options. You gain yourself back. Thomas Edison made a decision about electricity at a time when no one believed it was viable. He didn't wait for certainty. He decided, and then he made the certainty through action. Decide first. Clarity follows the decision. It does not precede it. Close the gap. Principle 5. The mastermind effect. No one great ever did it entirely alone. Not truly. We tell ourselves the story of the solitary genius, the lone figure burning the midnight oil, isolated in brilliance. But strip away the mythology and you'll find something different. A room, a table, two or more minds aligned in purpose, feeding something back and forth between them that neither could generate alone. Napoleon Hill called it the mastermind alliance, and he was specific about why it worked. He didn't describe it as mere collaboration or useful networking. He described it as the creation of a third mind, something that emerges between aligned thinkers that transcends what any individual brings separately. An invisible force, he called it, a form of energy that multiplies when intention meets connection. This isn't mysticism, it's observable. Henry Ford had Edison. Edison had a laboratory full of minds he trusted. Marcus Aurelius had Epictetus's philosophy as a constant intellectual companion, though they never shared a room. The point isn't physical proximity, it's energetic alignment. The people you choose to think alongside shape the ceiling of what you believe is possible. Here's the practical reality. Your environment is not neutral. The conversations you have regularly, the voices you let into your mind through books, through relationships, through the content you consume, are either expanding your belief or contracting it. There is no middle ground. You are being shaped constantly by the minds you spend time with. The question is, whether you're choosing those minds consciously. Most people inherit their belief environment the way they inherit an accent, without choice, without examination. And then they wonder why the ceiling won't move. Find people who are building. Find voices that challenge without diminishing. Read the minds of those who've done what you're attempting, not to copy them, but to borrow the frequency of their belief until you've generated enough of your own. Because when two minds align in genuine belief toward a shared reality, something starts to move. You can feel it when it happens. Build that room. Principle 6. Identity before evidence. Here is the hardest principle, the one most people circle but never land on. You are waiting for results before you allow yourself the identity. Waiting to feel successful before you act like someone who succeeds. Waiting to be confident before you speak like someone who is. Waiting for the evidence before you allow yourself the belief, as though the evidence comes first and the identity follows after. It doesn't. It never has. Every person who has built something real, something that required belief before proof, did it in reverse. They wore the identity first. They thought, spoke, and moved as the version of themselves they were becoming long before the world confirmed it. Not as performance, not as delusion, as decision. William James, the father of American psychology, observed that human beings can alter the outer conditions of their lives by altering the inner attitudes of their minds. The key word there is alter, not wait, not hope, not wish. Alter actively, deliberately, before the evidence arrives. The Stoics practiced this through what they called premeditatio, a mental rehearsal of future states so vivid and regular that the mind began to treat them as experienced realities. They were not fantasizing, they were installing. Think about the version of you that you most want to become, not the polished public version, the real one, the one who moves without second-guessing, who speaks without shrinking, who builds without constantly checking whether they deserve to. That person is not waiting for you in the future. They are waiting for you to claim them right now. The evidence will come, but it follows the identity. It does not create it. The man who builds the company first believed he was the kind of man who builds companies. The athlete first believed in the body before the body proved it. The leader first led in their own mind, long before a single person followed. You don't grow into the identity. You decide into it. Then you live there until the world catches up. So here you are. 6 principles in, 6 revelations. And if something shifted in you somewhere along the way, even slightly, even quietly, then you already know that this was never about information. You didn't need more facts. You needed a different frame. The world you're living in right now is not the product of your circumstances. It is the product of your thinking, your beliefs, your identity, your mental habits, the invisible architecture that was laid down long before today, often without your consent, and has been running quietly ever since. But here is what changes everything. You are not your programming. You are the one who can choose the programming. That is the thread connecting every principle in this episode. Stoicism didn't teach the endurance of suffering. It taught the mastery of response. Napoleon Hill didn't study luck. He studied the internal conditions that made certain outcomes inevitable. Edison didn't invent the light bulb through talent alone. He invented it through a quality of belief that refused to accept the permanence of failure. What they all understood, and what you now understand, is that the outer world is downstream from the inner one, always, without exception. So the question is simple, even if the answer takes a lifetime. Who are you deciding to be? Not someday, not when things improve or the timing is better or the fear finally lifts. Now, in this moment, with what you have, as the person you are already becoming, whether you consciously choose it or not. The man who no longer asks whether he's ready, he moves. The man who no longer asks whether he deserves it, he builds. The man who no longer waits for the world's permission, he speaks and acts and walks as though the outcome is already written. Because for him, it is. Thought is not commentary, thought is command, and the world, patient, responsive, waiting, bends toward the mind that has finally decided. Decide. If something in this episode cracked something open in you, if you felt even one shift, leave a comment below. I think, I decide, I command. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. What's coming next goes even deeper. This is not a self-help series. This is a complete reconstruction of the way you see yourself and the world. Thank you for being here. Now go think like it.